Ambassador Thelvan stood in the great chamber of the Galactic Council and tried not to show his annoyance. His 4 arms were folded across his thorax in what his species considered a patient pose, but inside he was irritated. Around him, the council members whispered and clicked and hummed in their various languages. The translation devices built into the chamber walls turned all of it into something Thelvan could understand. "You want me to observe the humans?" Thelvan said, his mandibles clicking softly. "Surely there are others more suited for this task." Council Archon Velmus looked down at him from the high seat. The Archon was ancient, her scales gray with age, her eyes still sharp. "You are our best military observer, Thelvan. We need someone who understands warfare, not just politics." "I understand warfare," Thelvan agreed, "which is why I question this assignment. The humans have been part of the Council for only 3 cycles. They barely have faster-than-light travel. Their weapons are primitive. What is there to observe?" Another council member spoke up, a floating gas being whose voice rumbled through the chamber. "The humans volunteered to fight the Krelax horde. Alone among the newer species, they asked to send their military to the front lines." "Foolishness," Thelvan said. "The Krelax have conquered 17 species. They are brutal and effective. The humans will be slaughtered." "Perhaps," Velma said. "But we need to know." The humans insisted, Thelvan. They were quite forceful about it. Their diplomats said, and I quote, "We didn't come to this galaxy to watch others fight our battles. We need to understand what drives them." Thelvan sighed, a sound like wind through hollow tubes. He had spent 3 centuries studying warfare across the galaxy. He had written 12 books on military tactics. He had advised 4 different species on their defense strategies, and now they wanted him to babysit a species that probably didn't even understand basic combat formations. "Very well," he said. "When do I leave?" "Immediately," Velma said. "A transport is waiting. You will join the human 47th Regiment at Forward Operating Base Arcturus 7. They are preparing to defend against a Krelax advance." Thelvan left the chamber and made his way to the transport docks. As he walked, he accessed his datapad and pulled up what little information the Council had on humans. He read as he walked, his multiple eyes scanning the text quickly. Humans came from a planet called Earth. It was classified as a Class 7 death world, which was impressive but not unique. Many species evolved on dangerous planets. Their gravity was high, their atmosphere was corrosive to some species, and their world was full of predators. But humans themselves were not particularly impressive physically. They had no natural armor. Their skin was soft and easily damaged. They had no venom, no telepathy, no ability to see in complete darkness. They were persistence hunters, which meant they were good at running for long distances. That was interesting from an evolutionary perspective, but not particularly useful in modern warfare. Their military technology was adequate. Kinetic weapons, plasma rifles, basic shield generators. Nothing the galaxy hadn't seen before. Their ships were solid but unremarkable. Their tactics, from what little data existed, seemed straightforward. Thelvan boarded the transport ship and settled into a seat designed for beings with multiple limbs. As the ship lifted off and jumped to faster-than-light speed, he continued reading. One thing caught his attention. Human casualty rates in their own history were astronomical. They had fought wars among themselves for thousands of years, wars that killed millions. They had nearly destroyed their own planet multiple times. They had created weapons capable of making their world uninhabitable. And yet, they survived. They kept fighting. They kept rebuilding. They never seemed to learn the logical lesson that warfare was costly and should be avoided. "Irrational," Thelvan muttered to himself. "Dangerously irrational." The transport journey took 2 days. During that time, Thelvan reviewed everything he could find about human culture. He watched recordings of their entertainment, which seemed to focus heavily on conflict and violence. He read their literature, which was full of stories about war and sacrifice. He studied their music and found hundreds of songs about battles and soldiers. They seemed obsessed with warfare. That was troubling. Species that glorified combat often became problems for the galaxy. The Krillax were proof of that. When the transport finally arrived at Forward Operating Base Arcturus 7, Thelvan felt a mixture of curiosity and concern. The base was a massive orbital platform hanging over a contested moon. Ships of various council species filled the docks, and there, among them, were the human vessels. Thelvan had to admit they looked impressive. The human ships were angular and aggressive, painted in grays and blacks, bristling with weapons. They had names stenciled on their hulls in human writing: UESC Indomitable, UESC Defiant, UESC Unbroken. Aggressive naming convention, Thelvan noted in his datapad. Suggests cultural emphasis on persistence and defiance. A human shuttle arrived to take him to the main human carrier ship. As Thelvan boarded, he got his first look at actual human soldiers. There were two of them, young by human standards, wearing combat armor and carrying rifles. They saluted him, which he understood was a human military greeting. "Ambassador Thelvan," one of them said. "Welcome aboard, sir. I'm Corporal Lee. This is Private Han. We'll take you to Colonel Jinho." "Thank you," Thelvan said, trying to use the proper human response. As the shuttle flew toward the carrier ship, Thelvan observed the two soldiers. They were chatting with each other, laughing about something. They seemed relaxed, almost casual. This surprised him. They were in a war zone. The Krillax could attack at any moment. Shouldn't they be more serious? The shuttle docked inside the massive carrier ship, and Thelvan followed the soldiers through corridors filled with activity. Humans were everywhere, moving with purpose, carrying equipment, talking into communication devices. The noise was overwhelming. So many voices, so much energy. They arrived at a briefing room where a human officer waited. He was tall for his species, with dark hair cut very short and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore a uniform with many symbols on it that Thelvan didn't fully understand. "Ambassador Thelvan," the human said, extending his hand. Thelvan had read about this gesture and carefully extended one of his own hands to grip it. "I'm Colonel Jinho, commander of the 47th Regiment. Welcome to the Indomitable." "Thank you, Colonel," Thelvan said. "I am here to observe your operations." "So we heard," Jinho said, gesturing for Thelvan to sit. The room had chairs designed for various species, and Thelvan found one that accommodated his form. "I'll be honest with you, Ambassador. We're about to get hit hard. The Krillax are massing for an assault on Outpost Salem. We've been tasked with holding it." "How many Krillax?" Thelvan asked. "Intelligence estimates around 40,000 warriors," Jinho said calmly. Thelvan felt his respiratory system stutter. 40,000? How many soldiers do you have?" "The 47th Regiment has 800 combat personnel," Jinho said, "plus support staff." Thelvan stared at the human. 800 against 40,000. The numbers were absurd. "Colonel, that is a 50-to-1 ratio. This is not a defensible position. You should request reinforcement or withdraw." Jinho smiled. It was not a happy expression. "We were asked to hold Outpost Salem, Ambassador, so we're going to hold it. You wanted to observe human military operations? You're about to get a very thorough education." Thelvan suddenly realized that this assignment was going to be far more dangerous than he had anticipated, and somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that perhaps the humans were either very brave or very stupid. He suspected he was about to find out which. Colonel Jinho took Thelvan on a tour of the ship, and with every step, the ambassador's confusion grew. The human soldiers were nothing like what he expected. They were loud and energetic, calling out to each other across corridors, laughing at jokes Thelvan didn't understand. Some were listening to music through small devices, nodding their heads to rhythms. Others were engaged in what looked like playful combat, wrestling and pushing each other. "Is discipline not enforced in the human military?" Thelvan asked carefully. Jinho looked at the soldiers and smiled. "They're off duty, Ambassador. When it's time to fight, they'll fight. Right now, I want them to remember what they're fighting for. Each other, home, life." They passed by a common area where a group of soldiers was gathered around a table. They were playing some kind of game with cards, shouting and groaning as cards were revealed. Money was changing hands. One soldier saw Jinho and called out, "Colonel, want to join the next hand?" "Maybe later, Kim," Jinho called back. "Try not to lose your entire paycheck." The soldiers laughed. Thelvan made notes on his datapad. The informality was striking. In every other military he had observed, there was clear separation between ranks. Officers did not joke with enlisted soldiers, but here the humans seemed to operate on a different principle. They entered the medical bay, and Jinho introduced Thelvan to Lieutenant Yuna. She was younger than Jinho, with sharp eyes and quick movements. She was currently treating a soldier who had injured his hand during training. "Ambassador," she said, nodding at Thelvan while she wrapped the soldier's hand. "Welcome to our little floating hospital." "You are the chief medical officer?" Thelvan asked. "Combat medic," Yuna corrected. "I go where the fighting goes. Can't help anyone from back here on the ship." "You go into combat?" Thelvan was surprised. In most species, medical personnel stayed far from the fighting. They were too valuable to risk. "Someone has to," Yuna said simply. "Our people get hurt out there." "I'm not letting them bleed alone." The injured soldier flexed his newly bandaged hand. "Thanks, Doc." "Try not to punch any more walls, Sung," Yuna said. "We're going to need those hands for trigger pulling soon enough." They left the medical bay and continued the tour. Jinho took Thelvan to the armory, where a large human was methodically cleaning a massive weapon. The weapon was easily as long as Thelvan was tall, with multiple barrels and a power pack that hummed with energy. "Ambassador, this is Sergeant Doyen, our heavy weapons specialist," Jinho said. Doyen looked up and grinned. His face was scarred, and his arms were thick with muscle. "Ambassador, hope you like loud noises. This beauty here makes a lot of them." "What is that weapon?" Thelvan asked. "This is Betsy," Doyen said, patting the weapon affectionately. "Rotating plasma cannon. Fires 6,000 rounds per minute. When the Krillax come, Betsy and I are going to have a conversation with them." "You named your weapon?" Thelvan asked. "Of course," Doyen said. "You take care of your tools. They take care of you. Betsy here has saved my life more times than I can count." Jinho led Thelvan to the barracks, where rows of bunks held sleeping soldiers or soldiers preparing their equipment. On one bunk, a very young human sat writing something on paper with an actual pen. She looked up as they approached and quickly stood at attention. "At ease, Private Nari," Jinho said. "This is Ambassador Thelvan. He'll be observing us during the upcoming operation." "Sir," Nari said. Her voice was steady, but Thelvan noticed her hands were shaking slightly. "Ambassador, this is Private Nari's first combat deployment," Jinho explained. "She graduated training 2 months ago. You are sending inexperienced soldiers into combat against the Krillax?" Thelvan couldn't hide his shock. "Everyone's inexperienced until they're not," Jinho said. "Nari scored top of her class in marksmanship and tactics. She'll do fine." After Jinho left, Thelvan noticed Nari return to her bunk and continue writing. Curiosity overcame him, and he approached her. "What are you writing, if I may ask?" Nari looked up, startled. "Oh, it's a letter. To my family. In case I don't come back." Thelvan felt something uncomfortable in his chest. "You expect to die?" "I don't know," Nari said honestly. "The numbers aren't good. 40,000 Krillax against 800 of us. But Colonel Jinho says we can hold them, and if he says we can do it, then I believe him." "Why?" Thelvan asked. "Why do you trust him so completely?" Nari thought about this. "Because he's never lied to us. He doesn't promise victory. He doesn't say it will be easy. He just says that if we stick together, we have a chance, and that's enough." That evening, Jinho invited Thelvan to a briefing with all the squad leaders. The room was packed with humans, maybe 50 of them, all listening as Jinho explained the tactical situation using holographic displays. "Outpost Salem sits on a ridge," Jinho said, pointing at the terrain map. "It controls access to the valley below. If the Krillax take it, they can push through to the civilian evacuation zone. We cannot let that happen." "Sir, the numbers," one squad leader said. "How are we supposed to hold against those odds?" "With superior position, superior firepower, and superior determination," Jinho said. "The Krillax are brave, but they rely on overwhelming force. They'll try to swarm us. We'll use overlapping fields of fire, fallback positions, and every trick in the book. And when they think we're beaten, we'll counterattack." "And if we run out of ammunition?" another asked. Doyun spoke up from the back. "Then we fix bayonets and get personal." Some of the soldiers laughed, but it was a dark kind of laughter. Thelvan realized they weren't joking. They were actually prepared to fight with bladed weapons if necessary. "Questions?" Jinho asked. "When do we deploy?" someone called out. 0600 tomorrow, Jinho said. "Get rest. Check your gear. Make your peace with whatever gods you believe in. And remember what we're here for. There are 3 million civilians evacuating through that valley. Every hour we hold is another 1,000 lives saved. We hold because no one else can. We hold because it's right. We hold because we're the 47th, and we don't break." "We don't break!" the soldiers repeated, their voices thundering through the room. As the briefing ended and the soldiers filed out, Thelvan approached Jinho. "Colonel, I must advise against this operation. The casualties will be catastrophic." "Probably," Jinho agreed. "Ambassador, let me show you something." He pulled up a file on his data pad and showed it to Thelvan. It was a video message from a human civilian, a female holding a small human child. "Thank you," she was saying to the camera. "Thank you for giving us time to escape. My daughter will live because of you. We will never forget." Jinho closed the file. "That message was sent to us from the evacuation ships. We've received 3,000 similar messages. Those people are counting on us. Their children are counting on us. So yes, the numbers are bad. Yes, we'll take casualties. But we're going to hold that outpost, Ambassador. Because if we don't, who will?" Thelvan had no answer to that. Later that night, Thelvan couldn't sleep. He wandered the ship and found himself in the common area. Several soldiers were still awake. They were singing together, their voices harmonizing in a way that was surprisingly beautiful. The song was sad and slow, about soldiers far from home, about sacrifice and duty. Yuna was there, singing along. When she saw Thelvan, she waved him over. "Can't sleep either, Ambassador?" "Your people are singing before battle," Thelvan said. "Why?" "Old tradition," Yuna said. "Reminds us what we're fighting for. Reminds us we're not alone." She smiled. "You look worried, Ambassador." "I am calculating your survival odds," Thelvan admitted. "They are not favorable." "Probably not," Yuna agreed cheerfully. "But you know what? We've beaten bad odds before. Humanity has survived ice ages, plagues, wars, disasters. We're stubborn that way. We don't quit." "That seems irrational," Thelvan said. "Maybe," Yuna said, "but it's who we are." As Thelvan returned to his quarters, he began composing his first report to the council. But he found himself uncertain what to say. The humans were strange, informal, seemingly undisciplined. And yet, there was something underneath it all, something he couldn't quite identify. a kind of steel wrapped in laughter, a determination masked by casual jokes. Tomorrow he would see if that was enough to survive the Krillax. He suspected it wouldn't be. The dropships descended through the atmosphere at dawn. Thelvan sat strapped into a seat, surrounded by human soldiers who were checking their weapons one final time. The ride was rough, and the ship shook with turbulence. The humans didn't seem bothered. Some were sleeping, others were quietly talking. Private Nari sat across from Thelvan, her eyes closed, lips moving in what might have been prayer. Outpost Salem was a fortified position built into a rocky ridge. Concrete bunkers, weapons emplacements, and defensive walls surrounded the main structure. It overlooked a valley that the evacuating civilians needed to pass through. From here, 800 human soldiers were supposed to hold off 40,000 Krillax warriors. As the dropships landed, Colonel Jinho gathered his officers for final instructions. Standard defensive positions, overlapping fire zones, conserve ammunition, make every shot count, and remember, we're buying time. Every minute we hold is a victory. The soldiers dispersed to their positions. Thelvan followed Jinho to the command bunker, a reinforced structure with communication equipment and tactical displays. From here, they could see the entire battlefield. "They'll come from the north," Jinho said, studying the terrain. "The valley narrows there. They'll have to funnel through." "That helps your defensive position," Thelvan observed. "Some," Jinho agreed. "But they have numbers. They can afford to throw warriors at us until we run out of bullets." Thelvan was about to respond when the alarms sounded. On the tactical display, red markers appeared. Thousands of them. The Krillax were coming. The ambassador moved to an observation window and felt his breathing stop. The Krillax horde looked like a living tide. They were massive creatures, 3 times the size of humans, with thick armor plating and multiple limbs ending in razor-sharp claws. They moved fast, covering ground in great leaping bounds, and there were so many of them. The ground itself seemed to disappear under their numbers. "All stations, weapons free," Jinho said calmly into his communication device. "Fire at will." The human weapons opened up. Artillery shells screamed overhead, exploding in the Krillax formations. Machine guns chattered, their tracers drawing lines of fire across the battlefield. Plasma weapons discharged with sharp cracks. The noise was overwhelming. The Krillax kept coming. They didn't slow. They didn't take cover. They just charged forward, roaring their battle cries, trampling their own dead to maintain momentum. Thelvan watched as the first wave hit the human defensive lines. The humans held firm, firing in controlled bursts, targeting the largest concentrations of enemies. Krillax warriors fell by the dozens, by the hundreds, but more kept coming. "Sector 3 reporting heavy contact," a voice crackled over the radio. "Request support." "Doyun, shift to Sector 3, Jinho ordered. Through the window, Thelvan saw Sergeant Doyun moving with his massive weapon. The human set up his position and opened fire. The plasma cannon roared, spitting a continuous stream of superheated bolts into the Krillax ranks. The enemy warriors literally exploded under the barrage, but they kept coming. An hour into the battle, the human casualties began. Thelvan heard the reports over the radio. "Man down in Sector 5. Medic to Sector 2. We need ammunition resupply to Bunker 7. Lieutenant Yuna was everywhere. Thelvan watched through the tactical displays as she ran between positions, dragging wounded soldiers to cover, administering emergency treatment under fire. A plasma bolt struck near her and she stumbled, her uniform smoking. She got up and kept moving. "Lieutenant Yuna is injured," Thelvan said to Jinho. "She should withdraw." "Tell her that," Jinho said. His voice was tight with stress, but his hands were steady as he directed the defense. "She won't listen. None of them will." The battle intensified. The Krillax brought up their own heavy weapons, energy cannons that blasted chunks out of the human fortifications. A bunker took a direct hit and collapsed. The soldiers inside managed to escape, but their position was lost. "Fall back to secondary line," Jinho ordered. "Controlled withdrawal. Cover each other." The humans retreated in good order, laying down suppressing fire as they moved. But the Krillax pressed their advantage, pouring through the gap in the defenses. Private Nari was in Sector 4 when it was nearly overrun. Thelvan watched her position on the tactical display. 3 Krillax warriors broke through the line and charged directly at her bunker. The radio crackled with her voice, high with fear but steady. "Contact! Close range! Engaging!" The sound of gunfire was continuous. Then silence. Thelvan was certain the young soldier was dead. But then her voice came back. "Sector 4 holding 3 enemy down. I need ammunition." "How did she survive that?" Thelvan asked. Jinho pulled up the bunker's internal camera footage. The recording showed Nari firing her rifle until it clicked empty. The Krillax were less than 10 meters away. She dropped the rifle, drew her sidearm, and kept firing. When that emptied, she grabbed a grenade from her belt, armed it, and threw it directly into the face of the closest Krillax. The explosion killed all 3 attackers. Nari stood in the smoke and debris, shaking, tears streaming down her face. But she was reloading her weapons with trembling hands. "That's how," Jinho said quietly. 4 hours into the battle, the situation became critical. Ammunition was running low. Casualties were mounting. The Krillax had lost thousands of warriors, but showed no sign of stopping. They just kept coming, wave after wave, like a natural disaster given form. "Colonel," one of his officers said, "we're down to 60% strength. Medical is overwhelmed. If they push again, we won't hold." Jinho looked at the tactical display for a long moment. Then he picked up his rifle. "Then we hold with what we have. All command staff to the line. We're going in." "Colonel, you should stay in command," the officer protested. "The command is simple now," Jinho said. "Hold or die. I can do that from anywhere." He looked at Thelvan. "Ambassador, stay here. You're an observer. This isn't your fight." But as Jinho left the bunker, Thelvan found himself following. Some impulse he didn't understand drove him forward. He had to see. He had to witness what these humans were truly capable of. The defensive line was chaos. Humans fired from behind makeshift cover, their faces blackened with smoke, their uniforms torn and bloody. Dead Krillax were piled in front of the positions, but living ones kept attacking. The humans didn't run. They didn't surrender. They just kept fighting. Doyen was still firing his massive weapon, though his arms were blistered from the heat of the gun. "Come on!" he was shouting at the Krillax. "Come meet Betsy. She's got plenty of love to share." Yuna was dragging a wounded soldier back to cover, a plasma burn across her shoulder still smoking. "Stay with me!" she was shouting at the soldier. "You don't get to die today! That's an order!" Jinho moved along the line, firing his rifle, calling out encouragement. "Hold the line! Hold together! We're the 47th! We don't break!" A Krillax warrior breached the defenses and charged directly at a wounded human who couldn't move. Without thinking, Thelvan grabbed a fallen rifle and fired. The weapon kicked in his hands, but he kept pulling the trigger. The Krillax fell. The human soldier stared at him in shock. "Ambassador?" "Do not die," Thelvan said, surprising himself. "That would be inconvenient for my report." The battle reached its peak. The Krillax threw everything they had at the human position. For 10 minutes, it seemed like the line would break. The humans were pushed back step by step. Casualties mounted. Weapons malfunctioned from overheating. Ammunition counters hit 0. And then the humans fixed bayonets. Thelvan watched in horror as human soldiers attached blades to their rifles and prepared for close combat. They were going to fight the Krillax hand-to-hand. It was suicide. But before the Krillax could make their final push, human artillery opened up again. Shells rained down on the enemy formations with devastating precision. And from the sky, dropships appeared, firing support weapons. "Reinforcements?" Thelvan asked. "No," Jinho said, breathing hard. blood running down his face from a cut on his forehead. "That's our reserve ammunition. Everything we had left. It's all or nothing now." The artillery barrage broke the Krillak's assault. For the first time, the enemy wavered. They had lost thousands of warriors against a force they should have easily overwhelmed. The humans who should have broken were still standing, still fighting, still defiant. The Krillak's commander made a decision. The enemy warriors began to withdraw, retreating back across the valley, leaving their dead behind. The humans didn't chase them. They couldn't. They were exhausted, wounded, down to less than 300 combat-effective soldiers. But they had held. Thelvan stood among them as they began to assess casualties and treat wounded. All around him, humans were crying, laughing, hugging each other. Yuna was treating a soldier while tears ran down her face. Doyun sat next to his weapon, his hands too burned to move. Nari was sitting against a wall, staring at nothing, her rifle still clutched in her hands. Jinho walked over to Thelvan. The colonel looked exhausted beyond measure. "Still want to write that report, Ambassador?" "Yes," Thelvan said. His voice was shaking. "But I do not know what to say. You should not have survived this. The mathematics were against you." "Maybe," Jinho said. "But mathematics doesn't account for stubbornness, or for people who refuse to let each other down." He looked out at his soldiers. "We held because giving up wasn't an option. Not while people needed us." Thelvan realized something then. The humans hadn't won because they were stronger or better armed. They had won because they simply refused to lose. Thelvan requested immediate reassignment after the battle at Outpost Salem. He had seen enough. He had witnessed something that no military doctrine could explain. Something that made him question everything he thought he understood about warfare. He sent the request through official channels and waited for approval. The Galactic Council denied it. They wanted more data. They wanted him to continue observing the human military operations. Thelvan's protests were ignored. He was stuck with the 47th Regiment for the duration of the campaign. The humans regrouped for 3 days. During that time, Thelvan watched them recover in ways that seemed impossible. Soldiers who should have been traumatized were back on duty, joking and preparing for the next fight. The wounded returned from medical as soon as they could walk. Fresh replacements arrived, and the veterans immediately took them under their wings, teaching them everything they had learned. Private Nari, who had been shaking after her first battle, was now helping train the new arrivals. Thelvan watched her demonstrate proper firing positions and cover techniques. Her hands were steady now. Her voice was confident. She had transformed in just days. "How are you feeling?" Thelvan asked her during a break. Nari thought about it. "Scared," she admitted, "but less than before. I know what to expect now, and I know my squad has my back. That makes all the difference." Lieutenant Yuna was back on duty despite her burns. When Thelvan questioned this, she simply shrugged. "My people need me. The burns will heal. I can't sit around when there's work to do." "Your dedication is admirable but illogical," Thelvan said. "You should rest." "Maybe," Yuna agreed, "but logic doesn't keep people alive out there." "Stubborn medics do." The human counteroffensive began on the 4th day. The 47th Regiment joined a larger human force, along with units from other Council species. The objective was to push the Krillaks out of occupied territories and liberate several colonies. Thelvan observed the human battle plans and was struck by their sophistication. Colonel Jinho worked with other human commanders to coordinate artillery strikes, aerospace support, and ground assaults. Their tactics were flexible and adaptive. They planned for multiple contingencies. They studied the enemy patterns and found weaknesses to exploit. "Where did you learn this?" Thelvan asked Jinho as they reviewed the attack plans. "Military Academy field experience and about 10,000 years of human military history," Jinho said. He pulled up a data pad and showed Thelvan a list of texts. "We study warfare, Ambassador. We read everything from ancient battles fought with swords to modern space combat. We learn from our victories and our defeats. War is terrible, but if we have to fight, we become very good at it. The first assault was a night raid. A human special forces unit, led by Captain Bora, infiltrated a Krillax command post. Thelvan watched the operation through drone footage. The human soldiers moved like shadows, silent and precise. They eliminated sentries without raising alarms. They planted explosives on ammunition depots. They extracted intelligence from enemy computer systems. Captain Bora herself was terrifying to watch. She was smaller than most humans, but she moved with absolute confidence. She killed 3 Krillax commanders in under a minute, her movements efficient and brutal. When the mission was complete, the human team vanished before the Krillax even knew they had been there. "How many soldiers like Captain Bora do you have?" Thelvan asked Jinho. "Enough," Jinho said. That was all he would say on the subject. The main assault came at dawn. Human artillery pounded Krillax positions for 30 minutes straight. Then dropships screamed through the smoke, deploying soldiers directly into the enemy fortifications. Thelvan watched from a command ship as the humans fought through the Krillax defenses with methodical precision. Sergeant Doyen was in the thick of it, his new heavy weapon laying down devastating fire. He had insisted on returning to combat despite his burned hands. "Betsy missed me," he had explained with a grin. Now he and Betsy were having another conversation with the Krillax, and the enemy was losing badly. What struck Thelvan most was the coordination. Human soldiers moved in small teams, covering each other, communicating constantly. When one soldier went down, others immediately moved to protect and evacuate them. When ammunition ran low, soldiers shared their supplies. When a position was threatened, reinforcements arrived within minutes, and they sang. Even in the middle of combat, Thelvan could hear them singing their war songs, shouting encouragement to each other, maintaining morale through the chaos. Over the next 2 weeks, the human forces pushed the Krillax back system by system. The 47th Regiment participated in 7 major engagements and dozens of smaller actions. Casualties were taken, but nowhere near the apocalyptic numbers from Outpost Salem. The humans had learned, adapted, and improved. One evening, Thelvan sat with Colonel Jinho in a temporary camp. They were eating rations, watching the soldiers rest. Some were sleeping, others were cleaning weapons. A few were playing games or writing letters home. "Can I ask you something, Colonel?" Thelvan said. "Of course." "Why do your people fight so hard? I have observed 17 different species in combat. None of them show this level of commitment. What drives you?" Jinho was quiet for a long time. "Do you know what kind of planet Earth is, Ambassador? A death world. High gravity, dangerous predators, extreme weather. It tried to kill us for 200,000 years, Jinho said. Ice ages that should have wiped us out. Diseases that killed millions, predators that hunted us, other humans who made war on us, but we survived. We learned to work together because we had to. A human alone dies quickly. Humans together can survive anything." He pointed at the soldiers around them. "Every one of them knows that their survival depends on the person next to them. We call it brotherhood, sisterhood, unit cohesion. But it's deeper than that. It's evolution. We bonded with wolves to hunt together. We shared food with strangers so they would share back. We developed language to coordinate. Everything about us, our biology, our psychology, it all points to one thing. We survive together or we die alone. But that doesn't explain why you risk yourselves for strangers," Thelvan said. "The civilians you saved at Outpost Salem. You had never met them." "Didn't need to meet them," Jinho said. "They were people in danger. That's enough. One of the first things humans ever wrote down was, 'Love your neighbor as yourself.' We don't always live up to that. Our history is full of times we failed. But when it matters, when people need us, we try. We try very hard. A soldier approached, saluting. It was Nari, now wearing corporal stripes. Sir, we've received word. The civilians from the evacuation reached safety. All 3 million of them. They sent a message. They're naming a settlement after the 47th. Jinho smiled. Thank you, Corporal. Dismissed. As Nari walked away, Thelvan said, She has changed significantly. Combat does that, Jinho agreed. She's seen the worst now. Death, fear, pain. But she also knows what she's capable of. She knows her squad will die for her, and she'll die for them. That kind of bond changes a person. Thelvan watched Nari join a group of soldiers. They welcomed her with jokes and laughter, treating her as an equal. She was part of something now, part of a family forged in fire. I need to ask something else, Thelvan said. What will you do when this war ends? Go home, Jinho said immediately. Back to Earth. Back to our families. We don't love war, Ambassador. We hate it. We're good at it because we had to be. But peace? Peace is what we dream about. And yet you volunteered for this war, Thelvan said. The Council didn't draft humans. You asked to fight. Because someone had to, Jinho said. The Krillax were going to kill billions of people. We could stop them. So we did. That's what humans do. We see a problem. We fix it. We see someone in danger, we help them. It's not complicated. But Thelvan was beginning to realize it was actually very complicated. The humans were warriors, yes. But they were warriors who cried for their fallen, who sang songs about home, who wrote letters to families, who took in strays and adopted causes, who fought like demons but dreamed of peace. They were the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever encountered, and also the most compassionate. A week later, Thelvan received word that the war was ending. The Krillax had sued for peace. They had lost too many warriors, taken too many defeats. The Galactic Council forces, with human units at the forefront, had broken their military power. The 47th Regiment gathered for a final briefing. Colonel Jinho announced they would be returning to Earth within a month. The soldiers cheered. Some cried with relief. Others just sat quietly, processing the news. Thelvan realized his assignment was nearly over. He would return to the council and deliver his report. But he found himself reluctant to leave. These humans, who had terrified him with their violence, had also shown him something beautiful. Their ability to care, to sacrifice, to love each other even in the darkest moments. That night, the regiment held a memorial service for their fallen. 123 names were read aloud. For each name, a soldier stepped forward and spoke about who that person had been. Not a soldier, a person, someone's friend, someone's family. When it was over, they sang together, a sad song about soldiers who wouldn't come home. Thelvan found himself humming along, though his vocal structure wasn't designed for human music. Lieutenant Yuna noticed and smiled at him through her tears. You're one of us now, Ambassador, like it or not. Thelvan realized she was right. He had come to observe strangers. He was leaving behind friends. Thelvan spent 3 days writing his final report. He sat in his quarters aboard the transport ship, carrying him back to council space, surrounded by datapads and recordings. Everything he had witnessed, every conversation, every battle. It all needed to be organized and explained. But how could he explain what he had seen? The data was straightforward. Human forces had participated in 47 major engagements and over 200 minor actions. They had suffered 38% casualties but had inflicted catastrophic damage on the Krillax forces. Human tactical innovations had been adopted by other council species. Human medical techniques had saved thousands of lives across multiple species. Human logistics systems had improved supply chain efficiency by 40%. The numbers told a story of military excellence, but they didn't explain the humans themselves. Thelvan thought about Private Nari, who had gone from terrified recruit to confident corporal in a matter of weeks. He thought about Lieutenant Yuna, running into fire to save wounded soldiers. He thought about Sergeant Doyun, joking about death while his hands were burned raw. He thought about Colonel Jinho, leading from the front, despite every regulation saying commanders should stay in safety. He thought about humans singing before battle, writing letters to families they might never see again, crying for their fallen while preparing for the next fight, sharing their rations with alien soldiers, treating everyone with dignity, even enemies who surrendered. What were humans, really? The door to his quarters chimed. Thelvan opened it to find Colonel Jinho standing there with a bottle of some human beverage. "Thought you might want company," Jinho said. "And I brought alcohol. It helps with the thinking." They sat together and Jinho poured the liquid into 2 cups. Thelvan's species could process alcohol, though it affected them differently than humans. They drank in silence for a moment. "How's the report coming?" Jinho asked. "Difficult," Thelvan admitted. "I have all the data, but data does not capture the truth." "What truth?" Thelvan gestured with one of his hands. "The truth about your species. Why you fight the way you fight. Why you care so much. Why you refuse to break even when breaking would be logical." Jinho smiled. "Did you figure it out?" "I think so," Thelvan said. "But I am not certain I can make the council understand." "Try me first," Jinho suggested. Thelvan thought carefully about his words. "Your planet tried to kill you for hundreds of thousands of years. You survived by working together, by forming bonds, by caring about each other more than you feared death. That behavior became part of your biology. You cannot help but form attachments. You cannot help but protect those you care about." He paused, taking another drink. "Other species in the galaxy evolved differently. We have loyalty to family, to clan, to species, but humans extend that loyalty to anyone who stands beside them. You adopted wolves as partners. You made alliances with other tribes. You built nations from strangers. And now you do the same in the galaxy. You see someone in danger and your instinct is to help, even if it costs you everything." "That's part of it," Jinho agreed. "What else?" "You accept death," Thelvan said, "not as something to seek, but as something inevitable. It frees you. If you are already dead, as you humans say, then you are free to choose how you die. And you choose to die protecting others. You choose to die making a difference. That makes you very, very dangerous to enemies, and very, very valuable to allies." Jinho raised his cup. "To choices." They drank together. After a moment, Jinho said, "You know what's funny? We don't think of ourselves as special. To us, what we do is just normal. We see someone who needs help, we help them. We see a wrong, we try to fix it. We see our friends in danger, we fight for them. That's just being human." "That is exactly what makes you special," Thelvan said. "You do not see it as special. You see it as basic decency. You expect it of yourselves and each other. And when you fail to live up to it, you feel shame. That drives you to be better." "Are you going to tell the council they should fear us?" Jinho asked quietly. Thelvan thought about this. "I am going to tell them they should respect you. Fear might come anyway. You are formidable in war, but respect is more important. And perhaps trust." "Trust." Jinho seemed surprised. "You fight for those who cannot fight for themselves," Thelvan said. "You protect the weak. You honor your commitments. You grieve for the fallen, even enemies. These are not the traits of a species that seeks conquest. These are the traits of a species that seeks justice." Jinho was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "That means a lot, Ambassador. More than you know. We worry sometimes that the galaxy sees us as barbarians, violent primitives. It helps to know at least one person understands." They finished the bottle together, talking late into the night about war and peace, about home and duty, about the future of humans in the galaxy. When Jinho finally left, Thelvan returned to his report with renewed purpose. He wrote the truth as he understood it, not just the military analysis, but the deeper understanding of what made humans human. He wrote about their capacity for both terrible violence and profound compassion. He wrote about their refusal to abandon those they cared about. He wrote about their ability to turn strangers into family. The transport arrived at Council Space a week later. Thelvan was summoned immediately to present his findings. The council chamber was full, with representatives from dozens of species waiting to hear about the mysterious humans. Thelvan stood before them and delivered his report. He presented the military data first, showing human effectiveness in combat, their tactical innovations, their casualty ratios. The council members nodded, impressed but not surprised. They had already received preliminary battle reports. Then Thelvan showed them the other data, the recordings of humans singing before battle, the video of Lieutenant Yuna running into fire to save wounded, the footage of Sergeant Doyen holding a position until his hands burned, the image of Private Nari crying and fighting simultaneously, the memorial service where humans mourned their dead with dignity and love. Humanity should not be feared because they are warriors, Thelvan said, his voice echoing through the chamber. They should be feared because they are survivors who learn to love each other more than they fear death. They fight with the fury of a species that has known extinction and refused it. They protect with the dedication of a species that understands the value of every individual life. He paused, looking at the assembled representatives. But they should also be respected, because they will extend that same love and protection to anyone who stands beside them. They adopted wolves. They will adopt us, if we let them. And anyone who has humanity as an ally will never fight alone. Council Archon Velmus leaned forward. What are you recommending, Ambassador? Full integration of human military doctrine into Council forces. Immediate diplomatic elevation of Earth to Tier 2 status. And most importantly, establishment of permanent military and cultural exchange programs. We have much to learn from them, and they have much to teach us about loyalty, sacrifice, and perseverance. The council debated for hours, but eventually they accepted Thelvan's recommendations. Humanity would take its place among the respected species of the galaxy. That night, Thelvan sent a personal message to Colonel Jinho. Your people are now recognized as full members of the Galactic Council with all rights and privileges. Congratulations. And thank you for showing me what true courage looks like. The reply came 3 days later. Thank you for seeing us as more than weapons, Ambassador. If you're ever on Earth, you're welcome at any 47th Regiment reunion. You're one of us now. Always will be. 6 months later, Thelvan did visit Earth. The reunion was held in a large hall, full of humans eating, drinking, laughing, and sharing stories. Thelvan was welcomed like a returning hero. Soldiers he had fought beside came to greet him. Lieutenant Yuna hugged him, which was initially alarming but turned out to be pleasant. Sergeant Doyen introduced him to Betsy's replacement, Betsy II. Corporal Nari showed him pictures of her family, who wanted to meet the ambassador who fought beside our daughter. Colonel Jinho found him near the end of the night. So, what do you think of Earth? Thelvan looked around at the assembled humans, these people who had terrified him, who had confused him, who had ultimately taught him about the power of caring more than you fear. I think, Thelvan said slowly, that the galaxy is very fortunate you are on our side. And I think I finally understand why you fight so hard. You are not fighting for glory or conquest. You are fighting for each other, for the person beside you, for the people back home, for strangers who need help. That is a reason worth fighting for. That's all we ever wanted, Jinho said. To be understood. Not feared, not worshipped, just understood. You are understood now, Thelvan said. "At least by me. And I will spend the rest of my life helping others understand, too." They stood together, watching the humans celebrate. Not warriors in this moment, just people. People who had survived the unthinkable, who had fought impossible battles, who had held the line when no one else could. People who, despite everything the universe threw at them, chose to love instead of hate, to protect instead of destroy, to stand together instead of alone. That night, as Thelvan prepared to return to his ship, Nari approached him one final time. She pressed something into his hand. It was a patch, the kind human soldiers wore on their uniforms, the symbol of the 47th Regiment. "You earned this," she said simply. "You fought with us. You're one of us. Always will be." Thelvan looked at the patch, then at the young human who had grown so much in such a short time. "I am honored." "We're the honored ones," Nari said. "You didn't have to fight. It wasn't your battle. But you picked up a rifle when it mattered. That's the most human thing anyone can do." Thelvan realized she was right. In that moment at Outpost Salem, when he had grabbed a weapon to save a fallen soldier, he had stopped being an observer. He had become part of something larger than himself. He had become, in his own small way, human. As his ship lifted off from Earth, Thelvan looked at the planet below, a dangerous world that had forged a dangerous species, but also a beautiful world that had created a beautiful people. People who refused to let others fight alone. People who stood up for what was right, no matter the cost. People who transformed fear into courage and strangers into family. The galaxy would never be the same now that humanity had joined it, and Thelvan suspected that was a very good thing. Years later, when other species asked him why the galaxy feared humans, Thelvan would smile and say, "They don't fear them, they respect them. There's a difference. And once you understand humans, you stop fearing them and start hoping they're on your side." And when pressed to explain what he meant, he would simply say, "Go fight beside them, then you'll understand. They'll teach you what it means to never give up, to never abandon your friends, to stand tall even when everything is falling apart. They'll teach you to be better than you thought you could be. Because that's what humans do. They make everyone around them stronger, and they never ever give up on you." That was the truth Thelvan had learned. That was the truth he carried with him for the rest of his long life. And that was the truth that changed the galaxy forever. Humanity had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same.